I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 86 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources, pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, October 17, 2023, and the adopted motion of Wednesday, December 13, 2023. The committee is resuming consideration of Bill C-49, an act to amend the Canada, Newfoundland, and Labrador Atlantic Accord Implementation Act and the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Resources Accord Implementation Act, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Since today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of members and witnesses. Please wait till I recognize you by name before speaking, and for those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Although this room is equipped with a powerful audio system, feedback events can occur. These can be extremely harmful to interpreters and cause serious injuries. The most common cause of sound feedback is an earpiece worn too close to a microphone. We therefore ask all participants to exercise a high degree of caution when handling the earpieces, especially when your microphone or your neighbor's microphone is turned on. In order to prevent incidents and safeguard the hearing of health of the interpreters, I invite participants to ensure they speak into the microphone into which their headset is plugged in, and to avoid manipulating the earbuds by placing them on the table, away from the microphone when they're not in use. Remember that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Additionally, screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with our routine motion, I'm informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting. With us today for the first hour from the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Honourable Andrew Parsons, Minister of Industry, Energy and Technology by video conference, and also joining Craig Martin, Associate Deputy Minister of Energy Development by video conference. We also have from the Government of Nova Scotia, the Honourable Tory Rushton, Minister of Natural Resources and Renewables by video conference. Joining, we have Kim Doan, Executive Director, Subsurface Energy Department by video conference, and also Melissa Oldreive, Manager, Strategic Priorities by video conference. We will now proceed for our opening statements, and I will just acknowledge for everybody online, I use these two cards. Yellow means you have about 30 seconds left. Red means your time is up. I will try not to interrupt you in mid-sentence, but I will try to guide you when we get near the end. So we'll start for 5 minutes with Minister Andrew Parsons from the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. Minister, the floor is yours, and welcome to committee.
Thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure everybody can hear me okay. If I could get a thumbs up. We're good? Thank you. My name is Andrew Parsons. I'm the Minister for Industry, Energy and Technology here with the Government of Newfoundland and Labrador. Appreciate the invitation today to present with respect to amendments to the Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Atlantic Accord Implementation Act, Bill C-49. Our province is pleased that the proposed legislative amendments to the Atlantic Accord Implementation Act will ensure joint management of our valuable offshore wind resources, recognizes exclusive jurisdiction of waters lying between the jaws of the land and certain coastal waters, and modernizes provisions relating to the offshore oil industry. Our government is committed to supporting offshore renewable energy projects that have the potential to contribute to the goal of net zero emissions by 2050. Electrification and increasing opportunities to support decarbonization of the economy are essential to achieving these goals. I would be remiss if I didn't state early in my remarks that during the global transition to a net zero economy, as the world transitions from hydrocarbons to renewable energy sources, it will continue to require non-renewable energy sources such as oil and gas. Newfoundland and Labrador's offshore oil and gas sector is a major contributor to our provincial economy. We have made significant progress in positioning the oil and gas sector to meet the world's energy needs during the transition while taking steps to decrease the carbon intensity of the sector by participating in projects, initiatives, and groups focused on decreasing carbon sector emissions. With high ESG standards and performance, our offshore is an important, reliable supplier during the energy transition. We also have so much to offer when it comes to renewable energy resources, whether it's meeting net zero commitments, mitigating the impacts of climate change, or growing clean energy jobs and supporting economic development. The proposed legislative amendments to the Act are significant for our province as we work to develop our renewable energy offshore. They will ensure the necessary measures are in place to support offshore renewable opportunities, allow for a fiscal regime that provides the maximum economic return to Newfoundland and Labrador. It will rename the CNLOPB as the Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Offshore Energy Board and expand its mandate to become the lead regulatory body for offshore energy in the offshore area and furthers joint management of the offshore area and builds upon the extensive expertise that the board has in managing offshore projects. It will define the offshore area for offshore renewable energy that excludes areas within provincial jurisdiction to ensure that we can move forward to regulate developments within provincial jurisdiction waters. And finally, it modernizes provisions revising the regulation of our offshore oil industry. Using our wind resources, we have an opportunity to develop some of the first large-scale projects that will produce green hydrogen for export for global demand and for some of our own commercial operations. And as early adopters in this industry, we are taking every step we can to move forward in the right direction. We, as a province, have the right ingredients to competitively produce and export green hydrogen from strong wind, fresh water, deep sea ports, and proximity to
The minister screen is frozen, so we'll maybe come back to the minister if that's okay with colleagues with about a minute and a half left. But we will go to the province, the government of Nova Scotia, and turn it over to you. Oh, actually, okay, you're back, Minister Parsons, so your screen had froze. Please go ahead and finish.
Okay. We would like to take our world-class wind to build a new sector that will create jobs and reduce emissions. We've been moving forward with onshore wind development, and this legislation will allow us to move forward with the development of our offshore renewable energy. We're looking forward to building into this green economy for the long-term benefit of our province. I want to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Minister Parsons, for your opening statement. We'll now proceed to the government of Nova Scotia and go to Minister Rushton. Minister, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to join you virtually today from Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak about the importance of Bill C-49 for Nova Scotians' transition to clean energy. Our province has some of the most ambitious climate change goals in the country. These are legislated goals, and we're determined to reach them. By 2030, we'll be off coal and have at least 80% of our electricity from renewables. By 2050, we'll be at net zero. There is no silver bullet to achieve these goals. It takes a suite of solutions to make them a reality. We're focused on made in Nova Scotia solutions as much as possible, and Bill C-49 is key for helping us advance them. We've released a number of plans to help us reach our goals. The Clean Power Plan focuses primarily on greening our grid. The Offshore Wind Roadmap focuses on harnessing the power of the world-class wind offshore of this province. And the Green Hydrogen Action Plan focuses on the clean fuel that can help with the transition both at home and abroad. They all work together to move us towards a sustainable future. But offshore wind and green hydrogen in particular really go hand in hand. Nova Scotia's offshore wind speeds are among the best in the world. They rival the winds of the North Sea, where the world's offshore wind sector started. We have an incredible opportunity here. That's why we set a goal of offering license for 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. We're planning the first call for bids in 2025. We want the world to know that we are open for business. Not just for offshore wind, but also for green hydrogen. These sectors are tied very closely together. We anticipate high demand for renewable electricity for green hydrogen production. So developers know they can pursue offshore wind projects at scale that make them worth investing in. So we're nurturing the development of both of these sectors. They are key components of our plan to meet our 2050 climate change goals. New sectors require new regulation to make sure they are safe and reasonable for the environment, for workers, and for other sectors working in the offshore. That is why Bill C-49 is so important for Nova Scotia. It will bring us to a new era of offshore energy regulation, an era that brings untold new possibilities for clean energy and for green jobs, not only in offshore energy, but also in the broader ocean tech sector. My Premier, my government, and I fully support this bill. It will expand the role of the Canadian Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Board to include renewable energy and rename it the Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator. The board will positioned for this expansion in regulatory authority. It has more than 30 years of experience in responsibly managing the health, safety, and environmental aspects of our offshore developments. It has the technical expertise and the administrative capacity in regulating highly complex marine environments. This skill set will be easily applied to the offshore renewables. Together with Natural Resources Canada, we'll continue to review the board's budget and capacity, and we'll make sure they have sufficient resources to effectively and responsibly regulate this new sector. Further, we're working with our federal partners on the regional assessment for offshore wind. It focuses on identifying where and how these projects can be optimally developed. It will inform governments on future planning for this sector. And it's an opportunity for Nova Scotians to have their say on how the sector and projects should be planned. We've been encouraging Nova Scotians to take part in this process, and we're listening to their feedback. That's why we made a decision in the fall to pause any consideration of wind development in our provincial waters until we have a framework in place for our jointly managed waters. We're confident that with that framework in place, offshore renewables and traditional industries such as fishing, harvesting can coexist, just as we've seen with natural gas projects, just as we've seen with wind projects in other parts of the world. Finally, I want to emphasize that Nova Scotia welcomes all the appropriate scrutiny to make sure offshore wind projects are done safely and responsibly, and that they can coexist with other sectors and interests. That will involve review of approval at federal and provincial levels, and there will all be lots of opportunity for public input and engagement with our First Nations. Again, I will state that Nova Scotia fully supports this bill. It is key to advancing our clean energy and climate change goals. We have complete faith in the board's ability to help safely advance these goals, and we urge the speedy passage of this bill so we can meet our timelines in Nova Scotia. We cannot afford to wait till Christmas. Developers are weighing their investment options right now as this committee debates, and we still need to make amendments to our own mirror legislation in time for the call to bids. Offshore wind in Nova Scotia is a great economic opportunity since the age of sail. There is tremendous opportunities for our coastal communities, for our province, and for our country. We cannot afford to wait. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Rushton, for your opening statement. Colleagues, we will now proceed to our first round of questions for 6 minutes, and we'll start with the Conservative Party of Canada and Mr. Small. Mr. Small, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today to take part in this important study. So my first questions will be to Mr. Parsons. Mr. Parsons, it's been said that Newfoundland and Labrador is an embarrassment of natural resources. So this is a very exciting time as we position ourselves to benefit from the emerging offshore wind energy sector with the development framework that's inside this revised Atlantic Accord here, which also addresses changes on the petroleum side. So are you familiar with Mr. Max Rulak? Mr. Parsons.
Mr. Chair, and I want to make sure I follow the process correctly, so I think I speak to you. Appreciate the question, and what I would say is that I'm aware of Mr. Rulak as an individual and as a former member of the board, but I do not know him personally.
Okay, so Mr. Rulak has over 40 years' experience in offshore oil and gas industry and former chair of the CNLOPB, as you just mentioned, and he says that it's a competitive business worldwide, the offshore oil and gas industry. He says there are three main factors required in offshore oil and gas development? Number one, sufficient resource availability. Number two, economic feasibility. And number three, appropriate regulatory regimes that provide certainty. Do you feel that Mr. Roulock speaks with authority when he says this?
What I would say is that I certainly have respect for his knowledge as someone who's been in that field. Again, I haven't had this conversation with him, but what he's saying sounds like it makes some sense.
So last week, Mr. Roulock submitted written testimony to this committee, which said, and I quote, Section 56 of this bill puts any and all offshore areas at risk of being rendered unusable for resource development, even though such activities may already be underway and with appropriate regulatory approval. He then goes on to say, no corporation will risk investing in an area where their production activities can retroactively be banned. Do you agree with his statements here?
I would agree with a portion of the statement that it would be hard to invest or have a retroactive that would have an effect, but I do not agree with the beginning of the commentary that this particular section or bill will have that, given that the fact that nothing can be done without provincial approval as it relates to our offshore. So that's not an issue that we have generally been too concerned with, is what I would say.
So how many offshore parcels were up for bids in 2023, Mr. Parsons?
I don't recall the number. It would probably be in the 30 to 40 range, but from what I understand, Mr. Tessier may have spoken earlier. So whatever number he says, I would certainly stand by that as being accurate.
So it was a record number in the 40s. How many bids did you receive from the industry this year, and at what dollar value?
I believe there were 0 bids.
So do you think that it's merely a coincidence that after this bill was tabled in May, with a record number of offerings to the petroleum industry, that not one bid was received?
Well, what I would say is that I've had no indication from developers, from the local industry, from people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis that this bill has had any effect. It has not been mentioned to me in any way, shape, or form that this particular bill had that impact. But nor am I shocked that there were no bids this year, which is unfortunate, but was not surprising.
Would you be shocked to hear that Texas received $382 million worth of bids for offshore parcels in the Gulf of Mexico in 2023?
No, I believe I've seen that number, actually.
So, is it possible that a clause like Section 56 in the New Atlantic Accord has created enough uncertainty for investors that we're starting to render ourselves uncompetitive in the world of offshore petroleum development?
No, I mean, I can only give you my particular view that I don't believe this particular section or legislation has had that effect. And I can only go by the commentary that is made to me. And I would say that in my 3.5 years in this role, that generally most operators or people in the industry do not shy away from telling me how they feel. What I would say is that it may relate to general, sometimes uncertainty as we talk about a global shift, which has been going on since 2020, which has had some impact. And again, maybe there's something I'm unaware of, but I can only give you my perspective on this as I laid out.
So Mr. Parsons, do you intend to mirror this version of the Atlantic Accord, or will you push Minister Guilbeault and Minister Wilkinson for amendments to address concerns which I'm quite sure you've seen being put forward here by witnesses from the fishing industry and also from the oil and gas industry? Would you have a look at addressing their concerns, or will it be, in the words of Max Roulock, the death knell for future offshore oil and gas?
I would say that I think that that statement, the term death knell may be a bit of hyperbole. Again, as it stands, we were very cooperative with the federal government as it came to the development of this legislation. Certainly, there was conversation between ministers and premiers and officials as it relates to this. But again, I do not speak on the entirety of government as it relates to how legislation were to go.
Thank you, Mr. Small, and thank you, Minister. We'll now go to Ms. Jones from the Liberal Party of Canada for 6 minutes. Ms. Jones, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. First of all, let me start by saying earlier in the committee sessions, the Conservatives on the committee made a statement that they felt that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador and the government of Nova Scotia had been hoodwinked into supporting Bill C-49 and the amendments. Can you tell me if you had full knowledge of what was going into bill and was an integral part of negotiating the terms and conditions of this bill, or were you in fact hoodwinked, as the Conservatives say? And I'll go to you first, Minister Parsons, and then to Minister Rushton.
Thank you for the question. What I would say is that our government, and whether it be the Premier, various ministers, as well as the officials, certainly played a role in the development of this. This is something, when it comes to the offshore, we've had a well-running board for decades now. And in this case, we were very interested in moving forward in terms of offshore regulation of this new opportunity. So certainly I don't feel like that there were any fast ones being pulled. I certainly don't feel like I was hoodwinked. Not a term that's come up so far, but interested in being able to answer any more questions, or if somebody wants to tell me how I was hoodwinked, I'd be very interested in hearing that perspective.
Minister Rushton.
Thank you very much. And look, first and foremost, I want to recognize the full confidence that I have in our current board in Nova Scotia. 30 years of experience plus a lot of expertise on that board. Certainly, these were conversations that we had from minister to minister, department to department, premier to premier, conversations with our board locally, and the process to do the amendments to this act. To ensure that Nova Scotia will have some say in this, to ensure that our voice is still heard at the table, and we can make decisions in conjunction with our federal partners. So no, certainly this has been something that we certainly worked very closely with our federal counterparts to ensure this bill was certainly something that we can foster in Nova Scotia and feel comfortable as we move the economy in Nova Scotia, and ensure that we're having green energy put into our system. That's only going to help our province and our country.
On Monday, we had testimony from Mr. Ches Crosby, the former leader of the PC party in Newfoundland and Labrador. He made two accusations. One is that your provinces has failed the accord. I'm looking for his exact words here now, to defend the accord in the way that it should be. He also said that climate change is bogus, indicating that legislation or amendments to Bill C-49 are unnecessary at this time if it's being done to meet changing climate targets. Can I ask you both to comment, first of all, on how critical this legislation is to clean energy in your provinces, and if it will support a growing economy and jobs in your provinces, because that is certainly not the testimony that we've heard from some witnesses at the committee.
Thank you for the question. What I would say is that I think it's very important when it comes to renewable energy that we be able to move forward quickly and efficiently. And certainly there's an excitement within the province as to the opportunity that comes with our offshore. But there's also the need to get a strong regulatory framework in place. As a province, we've been lucky to have that in place with our offshore oil. So we have a great understanding of how this works and how it can work, and the opportunities that it presents. And again, so I would have nothing to say there on that. We're looking to move forward. The last thing I guess I can say is that there are a great many issues or points that I do not agree with Mr. Crosby on, and these two would be the same.
Yes, so thank you. Certainly, this is very important for Nova Scotia. I can tell you stories of how Nova Scotia has trained many people for the ocean technology sector, and we've seen them go worldwide, traveling outside of Nova Scotia. For the first time in many, many years, we actually see those people that we've trained here in Nova Scotia coming back home to work in a sector that they feel very confident in. This is going to be a huge changing spectrum for Nova Scotia as we get into the green energy spectrum. This is something that's going to change the landscape in Nova Scotia. It's going to change the economic abilities of Nova Scotia in the years to come. So this is something that we need to take place very quickly. As I said in my opening remarks, we can't wait a long time for this to move forward. We're waiting at hand right now. And I guess to touch base on a previous witness statement, I've been watching the committee very closely. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see Monday's statements. But what I will say about what our government's done, I think our history in the last two years has set a standard for what we believe in. We have some climate change goals that are legislated in our province. They're not just things that we've stated. We've legislated that. We've seen different disasters. We've seen heavy floods in our province. We've seen massive forest fires in our province that we've dealt with right here within my department. So I think our history speaks for itself. We've put a legacy before us. We're going to action our plans and move forward on our commitments.
Well,
Thank
I want to
you.
thank you both for your questions. I appreciate that.
Thank you, ministers, and thank you, Ms. Jones, for your questions. We'll now proceed to Monsieur Simard from the Bloc Québécois for 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you. I just want to check whether Mr. Parsons can hear me properly with the interpretation. Can you hear the English interpretation? Yes. Thank you. I'm a member of representing the Bloc Québécois, and it is important to me to always note any issues of provincial jurisdiction, and I think that this does, but I do have certain reservations. I have heard witnesses here at the committee who have presented a perspective saying that fossil fuels and renewable energy are being put on the same basis. But in fact, we need to move through a transition. We need to work toward high-intensity fuels to net zero. You talked about the importance of this transition. I have a very simple question for you. Do you not think that we should add in this bill a clear indication that we will give priority to clean energy? And that isn't the case right now.
Thank you for the question. What I would say is that we've been a part of this process and we are quite satisfied with the bill as it stands. And we are looking forward to the quick passage of this piece of legislation. We would like to see this move forward so we can continue on with the development of our offshore renewable resource. But we've been quite clear the impact of the oil and gas sector on our province and what it does for us as a province, what it does the revenue that provides for our social system, for our network that helps pay for our education, for everything that our citizens rely on, with the jobs it creates and the royalties that it creates. And I don't believe there will be any change in that demand for some time. But we also recognize that there is a transition. Transition is not going to occur overnight. So we hope actually to take some of the resources that we get from this to help us with the green transition that is occurring with the offshore energy transition.
Merci de votre réponse. Je comprends.
Thank you for that answer. And I understand the importance of fossil fuels for your province. But do you feel, would you find it acceptable to have an amendment added to indicate that no future fossil fuel projects should be allowed? Would you be in agreement with that kind of amendment?
Absolutely not.
Ça a le mérite d'être clair. Merci.
Thank you. At least you're clear. What about if there are conflicts? For example, if there is a wind project that was somehow in conflict with a fossil fuel project, would you agree to an amendment that would give priority to the clean energy project?
No, I think what I'm a believer in is the opportunity to have clear conversations, discussion, and study into the pros and cons of everything and what the total impact will be. So I certainly take the point of the question and I understand the logic behind it, but I wouldn't be able to just wholeheartedly say yes to that without knowing what these different impacts are. And again, that's something we would work with our regulator on. Certainly there's a lot of smart people within our various departments that would want to see what the study actually is. So while I certainly get it, I wouldn't be able to say that automatically, yes, I think that the clean energy has that priority over it without knowing the full impact, especially on the future of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and keeping everything in consideration.
Ouais. Merci de votre réponse.
Thank you for that answer. As you know, wind energy production requires infrastructure, which is quite costly. And then the clean electricity has to be produced, and then to produce the hydrogen, that is also costly. I know that your province had cost overruns with a large project already. So do you know what a wind energy project that would produce hydrogen, do you know how much that might cost approximately?
Just a couple of things there. When it comes to the offshore, no, we haven't had any proposal put to us even in the roughest terms in terms of what it would cost, what it would entail. Certainly when it comes to onshore projects, of which we have 4 moving forward now, 4 have been given approval to move forward. They all differ depending on the megawatts, depending on the scope of the project and what they hope to produce. But I would point out one difference between the Muskrat Falls project, which you referenced earlier, which was commissioned back in 2012. That was actually funded in many ways by taxpayers. But in this particular case right now, the province is not supporting in terms of subsidy these projects onshore, and certainly have been no discussion as to subsidization of offshore.
Merci. Mais tout à fait, je suis conscient.
Thank you. I'm aware of that, Mr. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. We'll now go to Mr. Angus from the New Democratic Party for 6 minutes. Mr. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair. Mr. Rushton, I'll begin with you. My grandfather was Joe McNeil. He would have done anything to stay in Cape Breton. But when the coal gave out, that was it. They were gone. And we grew up as expats in Northern Ontario, where all the other Nova Scotians used to come on Saturday nights and sing the songs. There wasn't a single one of my relatives in New Waterford, Iona, Glace Bay who stayed. When the coal went, they all went. So I guess the issue here is that you have an opportunity, an economic opportunity, and we could sit and have it get blocked by the Conservatives, or we can move ahead. But the facts are the facts. The change is coming. So how important is it that we move with speed and we get this through the House of Commons so that you can do what you need to do to ensure economic diversity in Nova Scotia?
Yes, no, thank you very much for that. I certainly appreciate it. It's very important. I'm a tradesperson by trade before politics, so I know how many people left the province within my own trade, and now they're looking to come back. The speed at this, I'll be quite honest. There's people in the sector watching this committee over the last couple of weeks. There's probably people that have put projects on hold along the Strait in Cape Breton to see how things are going today. So you ask how important this is. Passing this bill is very important to the economy in Nova Scotia. There are there are people from all over the world, stakeholders that are coming to Nova Scotia, looking at the wind regimes that we have in Nova Scotia, the ability and expertise that we have in offshore, to make this home, to help Nova Scotia grow. Our population's growing at great numbers, the first time in many years. People are looking at Nova Scotia as a leader in many things. But what's something we're very proud about is Nova Scotia is being looked at as a green opportunity for green jobs. A green economy, and in years to come, I think that people are going to look back at this, and once this does get moving along, once Bill C-49 does get passed, people will look at this decades from now and say, here was a move that made Nova Scotia sort of a capital of renewable energy in the world.
That we're looking at what's happened in the United States, and I mean, I think I started following offshore wind in the North Sea about 5 years ago, and a lot of it seemed almost hypothetical. Maybe it's possible, it could, maybe, but we're seeing what's happening with the Biden administration, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Rhode Island, Martha's Vineyard, New Jersey, projects that are going to, give electricity up to 700,000 homes. The ports are busy. The tradespeople are going to work. You said investors are making decisions now. What message does it send to investors when we have a party here who said that they're going to block this legislation and they're going to sit on it? Are they going to sit and wait till the Conservatives decide that they're going to support Nova Scotia, or are they just going to move where the jobs are going, and the investments going, which is just south of us to the United States?
Look, obviously, I can't speak for the investors. What I can do is, as minister and representative of this government, is advocate to them that we want these investors here in Nova Scotia. This is a process, a legislative process that is going through. Would I like to see this done right away for the benefit of Nova Scotia? Absolutely. But my job is to advocate with them, work with them with the processes that are in place. But yeah, to be honest, I can't stress how important this is to our government, to our province, but also to our country, as we all plan for our cleaner energy spectrum and set goals for 2030, 2050, and years out. This is important to the future of not just Nova Scotia. It's important to the future of Canada.
Thank you. Minister Parsons, we know that Newfoundland and Labrador really benefited from the offshore oil and gas. You built up a world-class expertise. Just 2 years ago, Bay du Nord was approved, 300 million barrel project that went through all the approval process. So that's a hell of an investment of time, and yet the company walked. They said there was no economic case for it. That sent a real signal. We see the International Energy Agency is now predicting up to a 25% decrease in demand in the next 6 years. So if we're looking at that change happening as fast, how important is it that we use the skills that we've got in Newfoundland and Labrador, use ports like Argentia to start being able to compete, so we've got something to fall back on if the oil sector does make that transition that seems to be happening faster than expected?
So just a couple of things, and certainly I still believe that Bay du Nord is not just a probability. I do think it will happen. But at the same time, when we talk about the term diversification, this is the opportunity for true diversification when we can have an offshore that is not just oil, that is not just gas, but when we can talk about wind and renewables. And we're going to require that expertise, whether it's people that transition from the non-renewables into renewable, or the opportunity for people to come home. A couple of things I would point out is that when we originally started talking about wind energy in Newfoundland and Labrador, it was amazing to get emails from people originally from here who were living in the United States, who were in this field, and said, I might actually get a chance to come home, as well as the people we have, the expats that we have spread throughout Canada alone, let alone everywhere else, that would like to come home. What I would say is that delay here, to echo my colleague, a delay here now will be a delay in opportunity. It will be a delay in investment, and the capital will go elsewhere.
Okay, I just have a couple seconds left. What does it say for the Atlantic Accord that we have a federal party, the Conservatives, who say they're going to oppose legislation that is going to expand the Atlantic Accord and create jobs in Newfoundland, Labrador, and Nova Scotia? What kind of message does that send?
I'm going to try my best here to be as diplomatic as possible.
Oh, don't worry about that. Just speak your heart.
What I would say to clue up there is my only goal is to get what's best for Newfoundland and Labrador, and I will do whatever is possible to make sure that that happens. And in this case, this requires this bill to move forward as expeditiously as possible.
Thank you, Minister. We will move to our second round, and we'll start with Mr. Perkins for 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses. My first question is for Minister Parsons. My understanding is in 2015, there were $1.2 billion worth of exploration licenses issued in the call in Newfoundland, and pretty much every call since then that Newfoundland has done had exploration licenses applied for and given for considerable money. And then this bill was introduced, and for some reason, there were none this summer. So I'm just curious, you said that it was to be expected. So was it to be expected because this bill was introduced and you went from every year having exploration licenses issued and then having none?
So I think my take on this would be that, in fact, certainly there were significant money spent 2015, 16, and 17. But the downward transition actually started happening around 2020. So when I came into this role in August of 2020, we actually had an industry that was completely shut down due to the global shift in energy, due to what's going on with COVID. Thousands of people out of work, and that, for the first time in some time, had introduced an uncertainty here. And I think that obviously it had a tremendous impact on the companies, the operators themselves. And that is still playing out. In fact, these multi-billion dollar
COVID's to blame for no one bidding in 2023?
No, I think what I was saying is that we had saw that trend. All I can say is...
The trend was COVID. It wasn't a trend in 2023, but I'll move on.
Okay. Well, if I had a chance...
No, it's okay. It's my time. Sorry. Minister Rushton, there is nothing that this bill does that prevents offshore wind from being done now. It just gives a process jurisdiction to a board. But this bill includes the process from the Impact Assessment Act, Bill C-69, as we know. In fact, Section 61, 62, 169, and 170 are from that. So you're aware, of course, that once that came in, the ability to get projects approved has dropped considerably. When we look at, for example, the Till Cove Exploration Petroleum Drilling Project in Newfoundland, it's been 5 years going through this process. When it's Cape Ray Gold and Silver Mine, it's been 8 years. When we talk about the iron ore project in Newfoundland, it's 11 years. When we talk about the 15-mile stream gold line, it's been 6 years. It goes on and on. In Nova Scotia, the Beaver Dam gold mine, 9 years. You believe you need to have this in place, I think it's 5 megawatts for 2030. When this bill passes, or if it passes through Parliament, how is it possible, given how slow this process is, 6 to 8 years so far, and with no end in sight for those IAA projects in Atlantic Canada, that you think this can come online?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I guess what I would say to you is we agree with the amendments to Bill C-49. We've worked very hard. It was co-created with both provincial and federal counterparts, with both departments working very steadfast to this. We have a board that we want to be the regulatory regime for offshore wind that we have total faith in, that we can believe that things can coexist on the waterways from this board and their decisions.
Minister Rushton, that's a general answer. I was asking specifically about the IAA process and that it can't get done in the 5 to 6 years you've got left to get to 80% renewable. With this IAA process, and the Nova Scotia government has been curious as to why we have problems with this. We support offshore wind. We don't support the IAA process, which has killed every resource and energy project in this country. And now the Liberals are imposing it on the ocean in Atlantic Canada. So you can expect the same result, not a different result, on the amount of time it takes to get through. Are you believing that this can also be done without increasing the cost to ratepayers?
So what I'd say back to that is, as I did say, this was coexisted. So decisions made for the offshore wind are recommendations from the board. They have to be decisions that are communicated between both ministers.
Through the IAA process, but my question was about the ratepayers.
And I already answered you on that. We believe in the amendments to this bill. We believe in this.
Without government subsidy, the current offshore wind is 15 cents a kilowatt.
Mr. Perkins, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt here. We have our honourable ministers online. I would like to You'd asked the question, but I would like the minister to also be able to provide an answer.
I would, but I'd appreciate the answer.
Well,
not give me a
I
general
want to make
statement.
sure that the minister was in mid-sentence trying to provide an answer. So if
But
we
he
can allow
wasn't.
him,
He was
if we can allow
chewing
him,
up
I
my
paused the
time.
clock. I paused the clock, but I would like to have the minister be
I'd
able
like
to
him to answer
provide
the
an answer to your question, because earlier on, Minister Parsons was also interrupted through mid-sentence. So if we could allow our witnesses to please be able to just be succinct, but
We
to
have
provide their
limited time,
answer.
so I
So
want crisp
I'm going to
answers.
go to Minister Rushton. Apologies for the interruption. Minister Rushton, go ahead.
The province of Nova Scotia and this government certainly believe that this bill needs to move forward, and we believe in the amendments that have been put forward.
I asked you about the cost to ratepayers. It's 15 cents a kilowatt right now for offshore wind without government subsidy. And I understand your government is looking for 100% federal government subsidy to buffer that gap. Is that correct?
So that'd be very, very close to what the rates are right now with the price of coal and things. But at the end of the
Coal is
day,
4.5
we've been-
cents.
I wish coal was 4.5 cents. But right today, we will do everything that is possible and the best decisions for the ratepayers in Nova Scotia.
Thank you. Time is up. Thank you, Minister Rushton. We'll go to our next round of questioning and go to Mr. Blois for 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Chair, it's great to see Atlantic witnesses before this committee, and it speaks to how important this piece of legislation is to Atlantic Canada. I'm going to try to move quickly, but Mr. Rushton, you rightly identified that the Nova Scotia government is completely on board. I would suggest to this committee that not just your government, but I think all parties in the Nova Scotia legislature recognize the importance of this. I'll ask a very precise question. Do you see any issues with this bill from a provincial perspective? Do you see any amendments that have to be made to the bill as is? Yes or no?
Yes, and no, this is not a new bill. There's amendments to what already exists. The board exists. I have total faith in the board. And look, it's something that's needed in Nova Scotia to move the green economy and the green jobs.
Minister Parsons, you talked about this being a joint process. That seems to be something the federal Conservatives are missing, that this is not being imposed, as Mr. Perkins said. This is actually a partnership. Just very quickly, I think you've said it very clear, but just for the record, you want to see this bill passed quickly as possible, unamended.
We are waiting for that result, yes.
Mr. Parsons, Newfoundland had a great contingent at the World Hydrogen Conference in the Netherlands. I know this because my wife works at Stuart McKelvey, and she had the opportunity to meet you. And I just wonder if you could provide this committee just a quick shot, a quick glance of the international and global opportunities for Atlantic Canada in this space for green hydrogen. Mr. Perkins talked about electricity. That could be some play for the offshore, but this is really about green hydrogen and the ability to move ammonia. Can you just quickly tell this committee what that opportunity represents?
What I can say is that having been at the World Hydrogen Conference and a chance to tell the world about Newfoundland and Labrador, about the resource that we have and all the things you need to make it in an economically feasible way, one of the big things is educating people on the proximity. We are closer to the Netherlands than we are to British Columbia. So the reality is that we have everything, let alone a world-class resource, let alone ice reports, let alone a workforce. We have everything there. And right now we get constant calls from global, opportunities.
Great. The Conservatives have talked about Section 56. Minister, you were very clear that in your conversations with all of those in the oil and gas industry that they have not once raised this as a concern for you in terms of that provision. You were very clear that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is supportive of the oil and gas sector. Mr. Angus talked about what that represents to your province. I would suggest any government in Newfoundland and Labrador will continue to be supportive, but just to be very clear, you don't see Section 56 as being any impediment whatsoever for the future of oil and gas in your province.
The two things I would say is that, again, I would reiterate, Section 56 has not been brought to my attention by anybody in the field or in the province as being a concern. And the second part is we were a part of this process and this legislation.
And Minister Rushton, I'll go back to you very quickly. This is a distinction. The Conservatives are trying to raise the prospect of a pass bill, which is C-69. But this is completely different because we're talking about the Atlantic Accords and we're talking about a partnership where provincial governments actually negotiate with the Government of Canada. Again, just to highlight the difference between this is something your government really believes in and we should be moving as quickly as possible. Yes?
Yeah, no, certainly. I think I've elaborated quite extensively today how important this is to Nova Scotians, to our clean energy sector, to opportunities that are sitting at our feet right now. There's many opportunities at our desk, and certainly our government supports the amendments to this act.
And I think what I find so breathtaking is that we have two provincial governments, two provinces in Atlantic Canada, that the Atlantic Accords has been so important to our region. And the federal Conservatives know better than the duly elected members of the legislature in Nova Scotia. I don't know the situation in Newfoundland and Labrador, but certainly in my province of Nova Scotia, I have federal Conservatives from other provinces of the country that are almost suggesting that they know better than the governments and the place that I call home, which I think is astonishing. It follows a trend of the Harper government that wanted to tear up the Atlantic Accords. It is almost really, in my view, Mr. Chair, it is gatekeeping economic opportunity in Atlantic Canada. And, you know, I just want the ministers to know this. When we get this bill through committee, I'll be certainly encouraging our House Leader to move this as soon as possible. Because, again, the Conservatives are standing in the way.
Mr. Boyce, we have a point of order from Mr. Perkins. Mr. Perkins, go ahead on the point of order.
The Conservative government created the Atlantic Accord, and the Conservative government never tore it up. So sticking to the truth, Cody, would be helpful.
Mr. Perkins, a point of order for procedural relevance, not for debate. You can use that during your time, but you have 28 seconds. Go ahead.
So the difference between what Mr. Perkins is talking about is the progressive Conservative under the Mulroney government that he was with. He stands in a vastly different type of Conservative government this. But I'll say we will try to get this through as soon as possible so that the Conservatives don't block this. Last thing I want to say, Mr. Chair, is just thank you to all the civil servants. I noted some of the folks before the call. Thank you for their work in helping to prepare this legislation, and let's hope we can get it through for Atlantic Canada. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. We'll now go to Monsieur Simard for 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you. Mr. Parsons, you said earlier that wind projects and then the production of green hydrogen would be privately financed. But we know that when we talk to experts, there is generally public money that has to be injected to produce. There are, for example, tax credits used for the production of clean energy, and I'm not against that. We have to provide stimulation incentives for clean energy. So this is probably an easy question. Are you in agreement with carbon pricing?
Thank you for the question. I think when I was speaking earlier, I meant the reference to Muskrat Falls. What I would say is this, as it relates provincially, we will not be subsidizing, but I do believe there will be federal subsidization required for the development of these projects, which I think is a conversation that's already happening.
Oui, donc, sachant que ça demande la...
So, knowing that there will be a need for public funding, and of course money doesn't grow on trees, so do you think that the federal government needs a carbon pricing mechanism?
What I would say in generality is that I do believe in climate change, and I do believe that there are measures that had to be taken to address that. And again, it could require much longer than this committee has for us to get into the intricacies of that. But we do have a carbon pricing structure here in Newfoundland and Labrador that I voted in favor of.
Merci beaucoup. Je vous remercie.
Thank you for that. Mr. Rushton, I would like to ask you the same question. Would you agree to an amendment to this bill that might solve the problem of potential conflicts between fossil fuel and renewable clean energy projects?
Yes, thank you for that question. I guess what I would say is, look, that there has to be coexistence. We know that fossil fuels does have a pathway into that piece of puzzle till 2050. We're happy as a province where these amendments are and where they're going. And I think we have to take the recommendations of the board wholeheartedly when they come forward.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
I'll go to Mr. Angus for 2.5 minutes. Mr. Angus, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, you gentlemen don't look like you just fell off the turnip truck. You don't look like you were hoodwinked. It doesn't sound like this was imposed on you by the big bad Justin Trudeau. And we know that certainly New Democrats, we pushed for the investment tax credit so that we could match what the Biden government's doing. So I hope it gets to Newfoundland, Labrador, and Nova Scotia quickly. But my Conservative colleagues did bring forward some really serious issues. They brought witnesses, very credible witnesses from the fisheries who were concerned. The unfortunate thing was they filibustered, so we weren't allowed to ask any questions. So it was very difficult to find how we could move forward on the questions being raised by the fishers about their industry, about the fragility of the fishing stocks. So, Mr. Rushton, I'd like to ask you if you followed the testimony, is under the Accord and the board, can we address credibly the issues that have been raised by the fishers?
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely. The regional assessments are taking place right now out in the field. The first report or conversations due back at the end of March. But we as a department are also already hearing from the fishers and other stakeholders out in the water. And quite frankly, we're not interested in pitting one industry against the other. Other industries in other parts of the world, industries do coexist out in the water. That's a pathway that we're looking forward to. And after the regional assessment, there will be a process for further consultation. Once the amendments are passed here and we are able to put them in mirror legislation in the province, there'll be more consultation that takes place with the fishers. We're hearing from them now. We continue to hear from them in the future.
Mr. Parsons, I'll end on you asking the same question, because to me it is, and New Democrats, it's very we have to ensure that if we're building big projects, even to help the climate crisis and create jobs and diversity, that we're not impacting the fragile fish stocks and making sure fishers are viable. And again, it's unfortunate some of these great witnesses were filibustered, so they weren't allowed to speak. But are you hearing from them, and are you committed to moving forward? Should this be done at the provincial level, or do we need to do it in amendments in Bill C-49?
I don't believe amendments are required. I can say that coexistence between our oil and gas and fishing industries have existed for some time. And in fact, I think that consultation will be a part of this. In fact, prior to any project going forward, it would have to go through an environmental assessment for which there would be more specifics. And again, there's no one that can overstate the importance of the fisheries, certainly to this province.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are heading to our last two rounds of questioning, or members with questioning. We'll go to Mr. Small for 5 minutes. Mr. Small, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Parsons, I understand that you would like to see this bill rushed through, and that if not so, if that doesn't happen, there will be delays in investments. I can't quote you exactly here. And then right afterwards, you said there are currently no prospects for offshore wind in Newfoundland and Labrador. So why not take the time to examine this piece of legislation properly? And I know you've watched these hearings, or your officials have, and you've seen what's been brought forward by the fishing industry. So is there a need to rush it through? Which is it? Is it delaying investment, or are there prospects for offshore wind? Which is it, Mr. Parsons?
Certainly, I don't believe that I said that there were no prospects. I said there was no projects right now that are approved. In fact, we've had offshore interest in our wind for more than a decade, and we're finally at a point now where we feel we can move it forward. But in order to do so, we need a regulatory framework from which to operate, and we feel that this is the right regulatory framework for us. Certainly had a lot of people, including my officials, as a part of this, including myself as a part of this. We would like to see this move forward. Part of this will be, yes, I've had the FFAW reach out, and in fact, we were supposed to meet and chat yesterday, which was canceled by the storm. But what I can tell you, again, you know full well that the fish harvesters have had to coexist with the oil and gas industry for decades now, and we feel there's a coexistence that can happen here as well, and it will go through multiple environmental assessments.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. You said that it was expected that you'd receive no bids on our offshore for parcels in 2023, based on a declining interest in offshore oil and gas. In late January, I helped 6 individuals here. I have their names on my screen: Keynes, Murphy, Stephens, McDonald, Pittman, whatnot. Good Newfoundland and Labrador names who are trying to get a work permit to go and work in India's offshore oil and gas. In fact, in exploration. So the world of offshore oil and gas is exploration and development is booming. So. Do you agree with the federal government's approach and Stephen Guilbeault saying that he wants to end production of petroleum products?
So what I would say is I think I've made it quite clear here during this testimony that this province supports oil and gas development. In fact, we support exploration for it. We will have multiple drilling opportunities this summer in our offshore. Talking about bids, in fact, any bit of research could go to CBC from 2020 that showed that year there was actually a catastrophic drop in the number of bids.
Thank you. I've got one short question for your colleague, the minister from Nova Scotia. I've got a text this morning from a fish harvester in Cape Breton who says that I think it's the St. Anne's Bank has a proposal for a 4,000 square kilometre area to be used for the production of wind. What do you have to say to those fish harvesters that will not be able to fish there? Do you feel that they should be compensated? If so, who's going to compensate them? Is it going to be the taxpayers or the proprietors of offshore wind?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I guess what I could say is there's no application before this government for that to move forward. We don't have the amendments passed here in Bill C-49 to move forward to even have that conversation. So I guess what I would say is there's no application. There's nothing we're looking at as a government. I believe the staff have certainly heard the concerns from those fishers, and we'll continue to have the conversations with that group.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to our final 5-minute round of questioning. And Mr. Sampson, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both of you for your testimony this afternoon. It's very much appreciated, and you've been very specific in your answer, and I appreciate that. It's extremely important. It shows clearly that Nova Scotia and Newfoundland is strong behind this bill, are supporting the bill, but are also part of the process and played a role in this bill being what it is today, and I thank you for that. The Atlantic Accord is supposed to be a nice story. It's supposed to be about federal, provincial government working together to help create more jobs, improve the economy, improve the life of Atlantic Canadians. And yet, it's a sour taste in my mouth because I remember when the Conservative government pretty well ripped the Harper government, ripped the Atlantic Accord, and my colleague, Bill Casey, who was sitting in the benches with the Conservative, who was told that he wouldn't be thrown out of caucus, was thrown out of caucus after voting against the budget to protect Atlantic Canadians. Do you remember that when that happened? I guess my first question, do you remember that? And number two, why do you think the Conservative doesn't want to support Atlantic Canadians? We're part of Canada, and we're a very important part of Canada.
I'm not sure if this question is directed towards me or my colleague, but
Mr. Rustin probably more, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, what I can say is that as a member of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, we want to move forward with the development of our offshore resources. We have a very strong history of joint management under multiple governments, certainly far before my time, and it will be well beyond my time when it comes to our offshore oil. We want to move forward into a new industry now. We are supportive of this legislation, and we would like to see it, again, I have no issue with debate, but certainly would like to see it passed and for us to be able to move forward in the developments to come.
Thank you, Mr. Rustin.
Thank you very much. And I guess I would echo the same comments. No issue whatsoever with questioning the amendments that are put forward. No issue with debate whatsoever. This for my department, working with our federal counterparts, is almost 2 years in the making, if not more, to get to this point. We have people that are at our province right now willing to make investments. So we look forward to the passage of this bill so we can move forward with our green energy aspects.
Thank you. You know, supply and demand is the key here. We have the supply in Atlantic Canada. We got more wind than anywhere else in the world, and the demand is high right now. The world is looking for clean energy, and we have the potential. And there's $1 trillion of money to be invested. Do you not think we should be taking advantage of that? And what will it do to Newfoundland and Labrador and Nova Scotia when we become the leaders in the world in this energy? Mr. Ruston, we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and certainly just gives me the final opportunity, I guess, to just to emphasize how important this is to Nova Scotia. We have many people that are looking at Nova Scotia as a leader in the wind. Sectors are already here engaging, working on their plans. We do need the amendments to pass to sort of take the next steps with consultation, with setting up regulatory regimes, and moving forward with this very important project to set the stage for Nova Scotia and for Canada and for Newfoundland and Labrador.
What I could say to that is I think we fully recognize the impact that this new industry will have in our province, which is why we've been quite bullish on it and the opportunities that it'll bring. And we feel that it positions us quite strongly as a province that has fully relied on oil and gas for some time. And we're not talking about that going anywhere. We have an opportunity to move forward into a new field, new jobs, new investment, new royalty regimes, and benefits to Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. We want to move forward in that regard.
Thank you. And, you know, I feel like we get some gatekeepers here when we have a party that is opposing what both provinces want, and in Nova Scotia, a very progressive, conservative government that's working with the federal government to help Canadians and Nova Scotians and Newfoundland as well. So, you know, I'm a little perplexed because I look at the Conservative, I hear them every day in the House talk about jurisdiction. But doesn't this seem like Ottawa knows best for the Conservative? Doesn't matter what the province has said. We think it's wrong, so it's wrong.
They know better than us.
Any comments on that, please?
So, ministers, if you'd like to comment, I'd say very quick, please, because we're at the end, if there's a comment to that. Okay. Minister Rushton, were you about to comment? Very quick, if you'd like. Nope. Thank you. I want to thank both ministers. Thank you for taking your time, honourable ministers, and coming to our Standing Committee on Natural Resources. It's been an honour and privilege to have both of you to provide important testimony. With that, thank you for you and your teams for attending. We will now suspend for about 5 minutes to change panels. Thank you. Tuesday, October 17, 2023, and the adopted motion of Wednesday, December 13, 2023. The committee is resuming consideration of Bill C-49, an act to amend the Canada, Newfoundland and Labrador Atlantic Accord Implementation Act and the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Petroleum Resources Accord Implementation Act, and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Since today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, I'd like to make a few comments on the benefit of members and witnesses. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation. For those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Additionally, screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all remote participants have completed their required connection tests in advance of this meeting. With us today for the second hour, we have Brazil Rock 3334 Lobster Association, represented by Daniel Fleck, Executive Director. We have from the Ecology Action Centre, Shannon Arnold, Associate Director, Marine Programs. We have from Marine Renewables Canada, Elisa Oberman, Executive Director. We have Member 2, Development Corporation, Chief Terry Paul. And from Net Zero Atlantic, we have Alistair McLean, Executive Director. Welcome. We'll now proceed with opening statements, beginning with Mr. Fleck from Brazil Rock for 5 minutes. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin by thanking the committee for inviting the Brazil Rock 3334 Lobster Association to provide our testimony on Bill C-49. The membership of Brazil Rock represents thousands of hardworking families plying the waters of lobster fishing areas 33 and 34. These are lobster fishers that call the waters of Nova Scotia home. Up to $2.6 billion in seafood exports from province of Nova Scotia, our members toil in the most productive regions of the fishery, meaning that any impacts would reverberate across the economy of the province. The Brazil Rock 3334 Lobster Association is an active participant in the fisheries advisory processes operating in the region, including the Fisheries Advisory Committee of the CNO-SPB that was much lauded in last week's testimony. We feel it is important to highlight that our ability to get answers relating to the real-world implications of Bill C-49 on our sector have been highly challenged by the apparent approach of the fishing industry should only be spoken to after the bill had been tabled and purely in an informal information session with limited accommodation by staff of the responsible departments. In short, we were asking important questions but not receiving answers that shed any sort of real insights on the issues before us. Many of our questions you have already heard from other witnesses associated with the fishing industry. For instance, how is the legislation that is before you appropriate for offshore wind energy or other marine energy production? During the initial drafting of the Accord legislation, the only energy projects being pondered in the offshore areas were restricted to oil and gas, and there was incredible focus on the development of suitable legislative tool to ensure development was safe and well thought out. Yet the legislation before us merely amends the initial legislation to accommodate renewables, so is fundamentally unchanged from the original legislation with the content applicable primarily to the oil and gas sector, and fails to realize the advancements made around the world. How does this legislation empower outcomes of processes, such as regional assessment, which the industry is actively engaged in? As the legislation reads, any guidance from those processes is only loosely being considered as a guidance. Why should I ask my association members to take time away from their enterprises to inform an assessment process that can be ignored by the regulator when selecting areas for development? The legislation is also mute on impact agreements and otherwise for anyone outside the provincial or federal governments. In other jurisdictions, offshore energy proponents undertake real legal agreements with local fishers and or communities to ensure that any potential lost income resulting from development are acknowledged and accounted for on the front end of development processes. This legislation is intentionally silent on the matter. We have an opportunity to create a legal requirement that robust, transparent, and public agreements be achieved that will be to the benefit of those most impacted by the development. We should take that advantage. Furthermore, any damages needing consideration for compensation are restricted to incidents, namely when an event such as an oil spill or a piece of infrastructure negatively impacts a piece of fisher infrastructure. This creates a glaring gap for those fishers that may directly be impacted by reduction in fisheries productivity caused by the offshore wind development. This issue has long been a concern of the fishing industry related to oil and gas development, and we are dismayed that this input has again been ignored by this piece of legislation before you. We have much to learn from other jurisdictions on what to expect from an offshore wind development that fails to be considered in the development of this legislation. For instance, we find that while some regulators and developers suggest harvesting activity can be undertaken in an offshore wind farm development, the insurance industry in other jurisdictions refuses to provide coverage for those operations, citing unacceptable risks. No harvester would risk their multi-million-dollar investment under such conditions. Where can mitigation of this issue be found or even pondered by the current legislation? Our members are not opposed to the responsible offshore wind development in any way, but we can only move forward when the legislative framework which supports development be sufficiently robust to ensure the interests, livelihoods, and communities of those existing users of the marine environment are maintained. We realize that this legislation is being rushed to completion, but we encourage you to take the extra weeks to develop a framework which highlights Canadian leadership on the issue. A few short weeks of effort will not lead to profound delays in development off of our shores, nor will it imperil commercial interest in the Canadian development. The wind isn't going anywhere, and the technology to harness this wind in a safe and reliable fashion is only improving day after day. Take the time and build good legislation appropriate for the matter at hand. In short, on behalf of our members, here is our ask of you. Please consider the legislation, the development of a royalty revenue-based fund that can help and employed to support and compensate harvesters and communities that may be directly or indirectly impacted by large-scale renewable energy developments off our shores.
Mr. Fleck, time is up. I would just ask you if you have a sentence to conclude.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the Ecology Action Centre, Shannon Arnold, for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Shannon Arnold. I am the Associate Director of Marine Programs at the Ecology Action Centre. We're based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. For over 50 years, the Ecology Action Centre has taken leadership on critical environmental issues from biodiversity protection to climate change to environmental justice. I have worked in fisheries, aquaculture, and seafood worlds in Canada and globally for 15 years. And our marine program supports sustainable fisheries and ways of living off the ocean with the aim of keeping coastal communities thriving and the ocean we all depend on healthy for generations to come. We sit on regional, national, and international fishery advisory committees and marine planning and protection tables. And together with colleagues in our energy program, we are currently involved in the regional assessment for offshore wind development in Nova Scotia. We would like to express our overall support for the much needed amendments that Bill C-49 brings to the Accord Acts. We are facing a climate crisis that calls for a swift transition towards renewable energy. In Atlantic Canada, or Mi'kma'ki, Rapid shifts in our waters due to climate change are already affecting our coastal communities. More intense storms are damaging infrastructure and posing greater risk for those at sea. Fish and lobster are relocating to new areas, altering traditional fishing grounds. Changes in whale migration routes are leading to increased interaction with fisheries and shipping. And these impacts are being felt economically, socially, and culturally. While new and cleaner energy sources like offshore renewables will impact some fisheries, these impacts will pale in comparison to the far-reaching consequences of unchecked climate change on our marine ecosystems. Offshore renewable energy will likely play a critical role in our energy transition, and Bill C-49 ensures the regulatory regime needed to support this transition is in place. As we adapt, though, equity, community benefits, and the rebuilding of biodiversity must be centered. To that end, we are pleased to see provisions in this bill that will allow regulators to prohibit offshore energy, both oil and gas and renewables, in marine conservation areas, as well as the ability for the federal and provincial ministers to jointly cancel existing oil and gas interests in conservation areas. This power is critical for Canada to meet international commitments to protect 30% of our oceans by 2030 and to ensure that that marine protection is strong and of high quality. We're also pleased to see provisions introduced that support increased public hearing options for the offshore boards. However, if offshore renewable energy is to deliver on the promise of sustainable energy future for the region, the government must ensure that this bill and the assessment processes on projects to come are an improvement on ways that we have evaluated industrial development in the past. We would like to see the bill ensure that calls for bids are issued only in areas with a completed strategic and regional assessment. These highest level assessments must consider socioeconomic and ecosystem impacts, cumulative effects, and long-term sustainability objectives. This planning and assessment stage is essential for fostering participatory decision-making and establishing clarity on shared use and priorities for all rights holders and stakeholders. Individual project-specific impact assessments should follow. The bill should require these strategic and project-level assessments to be conducted. Clear provisions for full and meaningful participation in planning and assessment processes must be included alongside dedicated funding to support this requirement. Strong planning with inclusive participation will be crucial for minimizing conflicts and achieving coexistence and shared use. We support the submissions of our colleagues at the East Coast Environmental Law with regards to further details on any proposed amendments. The nascent offshore renewable energy sector offers an opportunity to depart from the exploitative and destructive legacy of previous industrial uses of our ocean. We cannot repeat patterns of energy development profiting large corporations at the expense of ecosystems and local community well-being. As an environmental advocacy organization, we do not take lightly the potential social, cultural, and ecosystem impacts of offshore renewable energy, and we share some of the concerns expressed to this committee by others. However, the climate and biodiversity crises compel us to act urgently, and yet with care. We reaffirm our general support for Bill C-49 and emphasize the crucial need for both the bill and the broader government climate strategies it is a part of to address concerns and impacts from the outset. This includes guaranteeing stringent ecological protection and safeguarding coastal livelihoods and habitats, providing extensive opportunities for participation in collaborative planning, involving fisheries expertise from the outset, and prioritizing the greening of our regional energy grid first for local community energy benefits. Thank you for this opportunity, and I welcome questions.
Thank you for your opening statement. We'll now go to Marine Renewables Canada, Elisa Oberman, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Thank you to the committee for inviting me to attend today's meeting. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to provide some insight just on how critical Bill C-49 is for the offshore wind industry and the members I represent here today. My name is Elisa Oberman. I'm the Executive Director at Marine Renewables Canada, or MRC. It's a national association representing the offshore wind, tidal, wave, and river current energy industry. We represent about 180 members, including technology and project developers, suppliers, researchers, and communities. Many of those members are focused on realizing offshore wind development opportunities in Canada, including companies already developing offshore wind projects internationally, as well as numerous suppliers with decades of experience working in Atlantic Canada's offshore and marine industries. To support these interests, MRC has been advocating for a supportive and predictable regulatory path that can both catalyze growth and ensure sustainable development of the sector. With some of the best offshore wind resources in the world, developing this new sector could help address several of Canada's clean energy and net zero goals, spur economic opportunities, and create new jobs. We view Bill C-49 as being critical to realizing these opportunities and advancing offshore wind in Canada for several reasons. First, time is of the essence. Canada is already competing against many other jurisdictions that have mature regulatory frameworks for offshore wind in place. Investors will go to the countries that have both an attractive energy resource and a clear regulatory regime. Bill C-49 establishes the regulatory path and certainty that is needed in Canada now. Delays in establishing a regulatory framework not only impact Canada's competitiveness, they also delay the economic opportunities, local jobs, and clean electricity that would result from offshore wind development. Second, amending the Accord Acts builds upon existing and proven frameworks that will allow Canada to develop offshore wind efficiently and effectively. Leveraging the regulatory experience of the offshore boards and working within a framework that the provinces are familiar with and help to establish creates a strong foundation for this emerging sector. This approach is not unique. Other jurisdictions seeking to diversify their energy mix and enable a transition to cleaner energy resources have also leveraged offshore oil and gas regimes and regulatory experience to support offshore wind. Third, establishing a regulatory framework is a critical first step amidst the other initiatives underway. We recognize that Bill C-49 is not designed or intended to cover every aspect of the regulation of offshore wind, but it will impact how and when offshore wind can be developed in Canada. Delays to enacting this law have ramifications on parallel initiatives, including Nova Scotia's target to begin leasing offshore wind in 2025. I also want to say that while we believe it is critical to move swiftly to have a regulatory framework established, we also recognize that this is a new industry for Canada. It must be developed responsibly with the scientific rigor required to maintain the integrity of marine ecosystems and with respect for the inherent legal and treaty rights of our Indigenous communities. That same respect must be extended to local residents and other ocean users. To that end, MRC and its offshore wind developer members have been working to foster an early two-way dialogue with fisheries, communities, environmental organizations, and Indigenous groups to understand concerns, share information about offshore wind, and find areas of cooperation and collaboration. So in closing, I would like to emphasize that given the critical importance of establishing a regulatory framework for offshore wind, Marine Renewables Canada supports Bill C-49 without any additional amendments and encourages the Standing Committee on Natural Resources to adopt the bill in a timely manner and move it to the next stage of review and consideration. We are confident that the contents of Bill C-49, along with parallel processes and initiatives underway at provincial and federal levels, establish the regulatory certainty that is needed by industry to make critical investment decisions and ultimately develop offshore wind in Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your opening statement. We'll now go to Chief Terry Paul from Member 2 Development Corporation. Chief, welcome. You have 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak to the committee. Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be here with you to talk about Bill C-49. As Chief in Member 2, our Mi'kmaq community located on Cape Breton Island, I can tell you that we are focused on two things. The first, creating economic opportunities for our community and the Atlantic as a whole. And second, investing in projects which will generate long-term stability for our people. So at the core of everything we do is the people we do it for, our community members. With every major project we take on, we do our due diligence to ensure that it aligns with our Mi'kmaq values while also pushing our community forward. This is why we support the intent of Bill C-49. Through this bill, we can enable the development of offshore wind in Nova Scotia. Member 2 is an equity partner in proposed offshore wind developments that have the potential to positively shape the entire landscape of our island. Traditionally, Indigenous Canadians were not invited to participate in major industry projects. I am proud to say that it's changing. When we all work together, great things happen. And we truly believe that an offshore wind industry can coexist with other industries in a sustainable manner. Member 2 has operations in sustainable seafood as well as offshore and inshore commercial fisheries, which will not be impacted by these developments. It is important to note that broad consultations, including comprehensive environmental assessments, will be undertaken before offshore proponents will receive necessary approvals from all levels of government. Ensuring habitats are protected is at the heart of these processes and is made clear in the proposed legislation. This is a value that is very close to us and of the utmost importance. As Mi'kmaq, we want to be part of the solution to fighting climate change. We recognize that the development of this industry is needed in the global climate crisis and to meet net zero targets put in place by the government. As a major harvester in the offshore fleet, we know that any forthcoming plans for offshore wind development will be developed thoughtfully and fully protect us in any other sensitive areas. We will continue to work with all interested and involved parties to ensure we create new opportunities for our people, while also protecting the industries that remain critical to our way of life. Thank you for providing me with an opportunity to speak to you today. Walalio, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief, for your opening statement. We'll now proceed to Net Zero Atlantic. Mr. Alistair McLean, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the invitation to offer some input into Bill C-49. I'm a professional engineer and the Executive Director of Net Zero Atlantic, an independent, not-for-profit research association with the mission of enabling the transition to a carbon-neutral future in Atlantic Canada. We lead applied research, contribute to projects, and provide credible and objective data for public discussion. Net Zero Atlantic supports Bill C-49. We specifically support expanding the mandate of the offshore petroleum boards of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador to offshore energy regulators, and we encourage rapid passing of the legislation. In 2020, our team at Net Zero Atlantic was curious why offshore wind wasn't part of the conversation about clean electricity in Nova Scotia, so we dug into the numbers. In the spring of 2021, we presented our results at a conference in Halifax. We found that by the 2030s, offshore wind could produce electricity at lower costs than onshore wind in Nova Scotia. Since then, we've contracted experts to produce reports on topics including how to stimulate offshore wind development, access to U.S. electricity markets, and best practices for stakeholder and rights holder engagement. We have a request for a proposal open now for an expert to study how the offshore wind industry would impact the Atlantic Canadian electricity grid. Further, for the past 2 years, we've been extending our research with community engagement starting in Nova Scotia. Together with Mi'kmaq leaders and our other partners, we've been building local capacity in Mi'kmaq, rural, and other equity-deserving Nova Scotia communities with respect to offshore wind. Canada's offshoring the Atlantic coast and the research needed to identify and reduce the risk of human activities in the area requires dedicated, careful, and knowledgeable attention. Before we became Net Zero Atlantic, our geoscience research focused on the exploration risk for offshore oil and gas in the Atlantic. As OERA, we contributed to a thorough evaluation of Nova Scotia's offshore geology. The analysis helped attract $2 billion in funding in work commitments from multinational energy companies, some of which are now active in the offshore wind space. It was during that work that we first engaged with the staff at the CNSOPB, so we've known them for years. The CNSOPB has experts on staff with prior knowledge of the likely areas for offshore wind development. The organization has decades of geological survey, weather, and ocean data. They also have excellent data storage and retrieval tools, thus reducing the cost and the complexity of future data storage and analysis. Although outside our field of expertise, we've seen that they have professionally run land tenure processes and regulated safe offshore industrial activities, including exploration, construction, operation and maintenance, and decommissioning and abandonment, all activities that are directly related to offshore wind. AGEAR A Danish offshore wind expert that we engaged for one of our studies shared the following recommendation, and I quote, "One-stop shop concepts of one authority coordinating key permits make for an efficient process with less delays and lower market risk perception," end of quote. That one-stop shop is what the CNS OER and the CNL OER would provide. Through Net Zero Atlantic's research and engagement, we know that offshore wind can contribute to Canada's greenhouse gas reduction targets while also generating economic opportunities for Canadians. Atlantic Canada is blessed with strong winds, large areas of shallow water, suitable geology, and an active maritime economy. Electricity from offshore wind in Atlantic Canada can be produced at similar or lower cost to that in the United States. Green ammonia produced from offshore wind energy could be delivered to Europe at similar or less cost in production in Europe. Given this, Atlantic Canada is well positioned to become a global player in the industry. However, the market for investment is competitive. There are at least 19 countries with offshore wind targets for 2030. Canada is the only G7 country without an operational offshore wind industry today. Developing an offshore wind industry in Atlantic Canada will bring significant economic opportunities to a region that currently has a lower than average GDP per capita. Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland and Labrador need an offshore wind regulator and a regulatory regime in place without delay. Net Zero Atlantic supports the proposed amendments to the Accord Act as outlined in Bill C-49. I would like to finish by observing that in September of last year, a Canadian company, Northland Power, secured $5 billion in funding for a 1 gigawatt offshore wind project in Taiwan. If we put the elements in place for a sustainable, equitable offshore wind industry, perhaps their next project will be a home. Thank you for the opportunity to provide my statement, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you for your opening statement. We will now proceed to our first round of, and only round of questions for today, which will be for 5 minutes each. So I'll go to 5 minutes each, and I'll go to the first member, Mr. Clifford Small from the Conservative Party of Canada, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming and taking part in our important study. Mr. Fleck, I'm going to start with yourself here. I had a text this morning from Michael Barron, lobster and crab fisherman from Cape Breton Island. He said there's plans to create a 4,000 square kilometre wind farm off Cape Breton on St. Anne's Bank, and says that he'll be forced into early retirement. How many lobster traps can go on a 4,000 square kilometre patch of the ocean floor, do you think, Mr. Fleck?
Thousands upon thousands and tens of thousands.
So tens of thousands. So you're talking enough fishing gear to support 35 to 50 families, would you say?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's just enterprises, 35, and then there's the crew members as well. So where will a guy like Michael go to catch lobster to provide for his family and his crew if he can no longer fish on his traditional grounds?
I don't think he will be able to. It takes a lobster. I'm not a biologist by any means, sir, but it takes a lobster 7 years to go from a larval stage or an egg until it's able to be harvested a legal size. So Michael or anyone in that situation might not see the ramifications of that for 7 years, if there's going to be lobsters there amongst that apparatus.
So there's no mention of compensation to fishermen for loss of livelihoods based on, in situations where they lose access to fishing grounds. Would you like to see an amendment in this bill to address this?
Yes, I would. Thank you for the question. I can't quote the section. I don't have it right here in front of me. But if we look where the legislation that they're using when it was developed to deal with offshore oil and gas, now to apply that same language to offshore wind, basically it's if a fin or a propeller flies off a windmill and it strikes a boat or damages some gear, they might take care of that gear. But there's no talk of actual compensation for that enterprise or that fishing operation that's put out of business because they've lost that ground and the fish are gone.
So who do you think should be responsible for compensating fish harvesters for loss of livelihood? Do you think it should be the taxpayer, or would you think it would be the proponents of wind energy development?
I would hope that would be integrated into the legislation now, that it would be the proponent to put that money ahead in case something like this develops or we become aware of it 6, 7, 8 years down the road.
Okay, so will your group be putting forward amendments to the committee in the coming weeks? Because I think we have just about a month to get them in. Are you working on any amendments right now?
Excuse me, sir, to clarify, you mean written submissions to this committee?
Yes.
Yes, sir, we will. And as well, we're active with the Impact Assessment Agency, and we're hoping that the recommendations from the Impact Assessment Agency and the regional assessment, their recommendations would be enshrined in this legislation.
So why are fishermen so concerned about not having an adequate seat at the table and their voices being neglected? Because that's basically what's been coming forward to us from the fishing industry. What leads the fishing industry to think that way?
Well, it's a 450 or 500-year-old fishery that's been feeding people in Canada around the world, and they're quite nervous to have, thousands of tons of concrete or whatever else for this construction placed in these shallow waters that has been mentioned before in the prime fishing areas where they want these to go for technology that might be obsolete in 10, 15, 20 years.
But if the consultation process was proper, would there be compromises? Could the proponents of offshore wind locate their projects in areas where there are possibly dead zones for fishing? Because as you know, you probably know yourself, there's some areas that are just not productive. Could you work together to work out compromises like that?
We are looking forward to be able to work together on that very subject. There have been, we're working now with DFO and marine protected areas. We bring our concerns and our comments forward. We're heard. We don't know that we're always listened to, and the decisions don't always align with what we've suggested.
Thank you. On that note, that's we'll now proceed to our next member, Mr. Cervera, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and nice to see everyone this afternoon. I'd like to start off with Alsdare, if I pronounce that, Mr. McLean. Mr. McLean, I wrote down some of the comments that you made in your remarks, and a couple of them, regulatory regime in place without delay, global power and offshore wind, the potential thereof, significant opportunities of an offshore renewable sector. You also mentioned Northland Power, and you mentioned their business activities off of Thailand. They also have significant business activities off of Poland. And as a chair of Canada Europe, I visited Northland Power's offices in Poland when we went there on a country visit about 2 years ago. And I can tell you that I agree with you, there are significant opportunities around the world, but there's a significant opportunity in Canada. So with that, I would like to ask you, and would like for you to reemphasize just how big the significant opportunity is off the east coast of Canada, and secondly, how competitive that jurisdiction relative to the rest of the world is in producing renewable power.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. First, from how competitive is the region, it's world class. I mean, everyone who's been to Atlantic Canada knows it's very windy. That's easy. But it's not just the wind. It's the combination of the wind, the sea depth, the geology. It's a very attractive area for offshore wind industry. And I'm not sure there'd be really many better areas in the world.
Okay. And secondly, as we all know, we need a robust regulatory system in place to allow that development to occur. And C49, I take it, would be a large step a large piece of that regulatory apparatus.
Yes, no question about that. The offshore energy regulators are going to be an essential component to making sure that there's a good regulatory process in place to make sure we have an industry that's going to be sustainable and inclusive going forward.
Thank you, sir. And I believe if I remember correctly, Elisa from Marine Renewables Canada.
Mr. Cervera, I'll ask you to pause for a second, colleagues. We do have bells ringing, 30-minute bells ringing. If there's unanimous consent for us to finish with our round, so all the yes, thank you. We have unanimous consent, so we will finish. We will finish on time. That will give colleagues an ample amount of time to get back to the House to vote in person if required. So we'll go back to you, Mr. Cervera. Go ahead. We have unanimous consent. We do.
Yes,
we're good. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Cervera.
It's unanimous consent. It's always good when we all work together in a collegial manner. I love it. To Elisa from Marine Renewables Canada, listen intently to your testimony as well. And in this transition that is happening around the world to renewable energy, in your view, how will this legislation bring certainty for proponents looking to build renewable energy projects off the east coast of Canada? In your words, please.
Thank you for the question. Well, I mean, at this point, there really isn't a path for projects to move ahead, particularly in areas where there would be joint management. And so you would be dealing, with two different governments on trying to get a project to move forward. So to me, that number one, that is very, very important, and this legislation does that. The other thing that I had mentioned during my remarks is also just timing. The fact that this legislation is being considered obviously will bring, certainty as well, and once it is established, both very important aspects of development and attracting investment to Canada.
Okay, thank you. I will. 1 minute, or do I? Okay. You know what, Chair, I will stop there in my time. I know my other colleagues will have questions to say, and we are 13 minutes away.
Thank you, Mr. Cervera. We'll now go to Monsieur Simard for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Mr. McLean, I will just wait until you're ready for the interpretation. Can you hear the English interpretation? That's working? Can you hear the English channel? I'll just give you a moment to look at that. I have a question for Ms. Arnold. Can she hear me? Yes? So, Ms. Arnold, I'll come back to you. Would you agree with having an amendment in this bill that would rule out any conflict? For example, if you had a fossil fuel project and a renewable energy project, that a renewable energy project would get priority.
Thank you for the question. I'll probably defer to my colleagues at East Coast Environmental Law on the exact whether there needs to be amendment for that or not, but we have put forward an idea that we want to see in the purpose of this, that it does reflect the mandate of the new acts to aim to include language that we're looking at a renewable energy transition and acknowledging the urgency to move away from climate change and move away from fossil fuels. So we would prefer that this really be dealing with offshore renewable energy and making move as much as possible away from fossil fuels immediately.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur McLean,
Thank you. Mr. McLean, I want to come back to you. In your presentation, you talked about a study that you did in 2021 that indicated that offshore wind energy could be more profitable than onshore wind energy. I don't know if you have any numbers on that, or whether in Newfoundland and Labrador, whether renewables is the way to go and through offshore wind energy. Thank you for that question.
We was using publicly available data to understand the comparison between offshore wind off the coast of Nova Scotia versus onshore wind projects in Nova Scotia. So our study wouldn't include an evaluation of the comparison in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Parfait, merci. Désolé pour la...
Thank you. Sorry about that. I want to ask you the same question as I already asked. Would you agree with the idea of having an amendment to this bill so that if there was a conflict between two types of projects, the renewable project, clean energy, should take priority?
Please remember, Monsieur, that my field is science, not law or legislation. So our view would be that the offshore energy regulator is a correct body to sort out those sorts of issues. We would hope that we might be able to have an opportunity to provide some science or some data to help people make good decisions.
Merci beaucoup. C'est bon pour moi.
Thank you, and those are all my questions.
We'll now go to Mr. Angus for our final 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Chief Paul, I want to just begin with you and ask you, because of the importance of sustainability and the obligation that the federal and provincial governments have to work and have consent with Indigenous peoples. Do you feel that this process has included the voice and respects the interests of your people?
Yes, I believe so. From what our discussions have been, and as I mentioned, we are a player, in this industry. So we certainly want to make sure that whatever is development, that the project is not only beneficial, but it's necessary, and it aligns with our values and desire to contribute to fight against climate change. So, we the Mi'kmaq, in our case, representing Member 2, I can't speak for all, that we feel that they have the consent of the Mi'kmaq.
Thank you for that. Mr. McLean, I wanted to follow up. I was really struck by the fact that Canada is the only G7 country not in the game on offshore wind. My Conservative colleagues seem to think that the price is really high and it's going to be subsidized. But from what I've been reading is that once these projects are up and running, it really drives the cost down of power. Is that not correct?
An important part of the offshore wind price advantage is the size of the turbines. They can be much, much larger than what's possible onshore. We're seeing 16, 18 megawatt turbines, and so that's an important contributor to the price coming down. And what we're seeing in the industry, those turbines are getting bigger and bigger. So with more and more experience, we'll continue to see the price come down.
I guess the issue is if Canada's sitting on the sidelines and we're arguing and being filibustered here, the U.S. is driving ahead. At a certain point, it's going to be hard to get investors if what the cost of being produced out of the U.S. is much cheaper, bringing in investors here to start from scratch when they are going to be producing low-cost power. Not only would it be hard for us to get investors, but they could actually start to sell excess power. Is that not a concern that we should have in terms of being able to compete?
I think the idea of looking at the competition for investment on a global basis is very important, and that's why Net Zero Atlantic supports this legislation. We think it's important to get the offshore energy regulators in place so they can be the focal point for the discussions that are required by investors coming into the jurisdiction.
Thank you. My final question is, Ms. Arnold, we've heard some pretty powerful and emotional testimony from the fishing unions in terms of the impacts of climate change that they're seeing on fish stocks. We saw a letter done by atmospheric scientists who said that the temperatures in the North Atlantic at the beginning of this new winter year is literally, they said, off the charts. We see threats now to the sustainability of the Gulf Stream, the Atlantic lung system. What are you seeing in terms of Atlantic Canada, in terms of the immediate threat from climate change and where we would be going from here if we do not take action on reducing carbon emissions?
Yeah, I mentioned a few in my presentation, but we are seeing it every day more and more with increasing storms. Like I said, there's species that are moving, which means, different impacts for fisheries and who can access those, who gets to fish and where they get to fish. And I think we ourselves are struggling with like the balance and complexities. It's calling on us to act with urgency, but we're not ignoring or pretending that this shift won't be difficult and that we all need to sit down and kind of figure that out. And we do think that strong planning processes should be required to be able to do that and find that way forward because, as you know, really, that climate change is already impacting fisheries, aquaculture, and other ways of life. And we have to reduce emissions and get off fossil fuels as fast as we can and not ignore. We need to take seriously those concerns. Things will shift, but we can find ways to co-design research and co-design planning and figure out what our priorities are moving forward to get to clean energy, to mitigate some of those impacts as quickly as we can.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I want to thank all the witnesses for joining us today. If you'd like to submit a brief, please do so to the clerk. This concludes our hearings regarding Bill C-49. Thank you to all the witnesses once again for today's testimony and appearing for the study. A final reminder to our members that regarding the committee study of Bill C-49, as per the updated memo, all amendments, including sub-amendments, must be submitted in writing and sent to our committee clerk by Wednesday, February the 21st, 2024 at 4 p.m. I'll repeat, by Wednesday, February 21st, 4 p.m. Should you wish to propose amendments during the clause-by-clause consideration, please send the Legislative Counsel, Mary Danek, your written instructions as soon as possible. She will ensure that amendments are drafted in the proper legal format. We will commence the clause-by-clause consideration of the bill on Monday, February 26th. That concludes this meeting. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn? Yes, sir. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.